U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Russia to stop destabilizing Ukraine and other countries and end support for hostile regimes such as those in Syria and Iran. Speaking in the Polish capital Warsaw, Mr. Trump urged Russia to join the community of responsible nations. The Kremlin rejected his comments. The U.S. leader has traveled to Hamburg for the G20 summit, where he will meet Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time. In Warsaw, Mr. Trump addressed a large, cheering crowd from the monument to the 1944 uprising in the city, on Krasinski Square. He hailed Poland as an example of a country ready to defend Western freedoms. Poland's conservative government shares Mr. Trump's hostile view of immigration and strong sense of sovereignty. The U.S. leader argued that the future of Western civilization itself was at stake. As the Polish experience reminds us, the defense of the West ultimately rests not only on means, but also on the will of its people to prevail, Mr. Trump said. The fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Mr. Trump also urged Russia to join the community of responsible nations in our fight against common enemies and in defense of civilization itself. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the Russian presidency did not accept that Russia had been destabilizing the region. This is exactly why we are waiting for the first meeting of the two presidents, he added. Giving a news conference hours before the speech, Mr. Trump, other leaders have differences of opinion with Mr. Trump on a range of issues and protests are also expected. Mr. Trump has fallen out with some EU nations over climate change and trade. UK Prime Minister Theresa May will challenge him over climate change, saying an international agreement on the issue should not be renegotiated. Aid organizations are expected to hold demonstrations in Hamburg urging the heads of government to do more to tackle inequality. It is important because you have the biggest meeting of all of the leading rulers of the main countries in the world, the G20 and I don't like some of the politics that they redoing, especially that of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of Putin and of Trump, one protester told the BBC. Security in Hamburg has been tightened, with police warning of potentially violent clashes. They have already confiscated a number of homemade weapons. U.S. leaders are almost always guaranteed a warm welcome in Poland, which will contrast with the protests being planned for the G20 summit in Hamburg. Mr. Trump talked of the triumph of the Polish spirit over centuries of hardship as an inspiration for a future in which good conquers evil, and peace achieves victory over war. Sandwiched between Germany and Russia, Poland suffered centuries of partition and occupation and emerged from the Cold War as July of America, ready to commit troops to the U.S.-led coalitions in Iraq and Afghanistan. By choosing to speak at the monument to the Warsaw Uprising, which was a desperate action ultimately crushed by the Nazis, Mr. Trump appealed to fierce national pride. Poland's current government has been at odds with some other EU states over its refusal to accept refugees under a 2015 Solidarity Plan. Mr. Trump's visit is seen as mutually beneficial by both Mr. Trump and the Polish government, the BBC's Adam Easton reports from Warsaw. However, the Polish branch of Greenpeace is using Mr. Trump's visit to Warsaw to protest against his decision to pull the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Agreement. The words "No Trump, Yes Paris" were projected in huge green letters on the city's Palace of Culture and Science on Wednesday. Mr. Trump also said talks he had attended in Warsaw of 12 nations with interests in the Baltic, the Adriatic and the Black Sea, the Three Seas Summit, had been incredibly successful. The Polish government is trying to become less energy dependent on Russia, and last month the first ever U.S. liquefied natural gas LNG shipment arrived. Commending American LNG, Mr. Trump told the news conference, "You can never be held hostage to a single supplier. A global glut in supply, however, has depressed prices and made it difficult for LNG exporters to turn a profit." Adam Szymanski, an energy analyst with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, was quoted as saying by Reuters news agency. Warsaw and 3 Baltic states have spoken against the construction of an offshore Russian gas pipeline to Germany, known as Nord Stream 2. EU leaders signed an agreement in principle with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe in Brussels on Thursday for a landmark free trade deal. It is estimated that 99% of trade between Japan and the EU will be liberalized, while an accompanying strategic partnership deal will see them cooperate in other areas, from climate change to tackling terrorism. Both want to show they are committed to a world order built on open trade and international cooperation, in contrast to Mr. Trump's America that is turning inward, BBC Europe correspondent Damien Grammaticas reports. EU-Japan trade talks had stalled after 4 years, but when Mr. Trump took office and scrapped his own possible Pacific trade partnership this year, it spurred them into action, and they resolved most of their differences in a matter of weeks.